Hey, everybody out there in Progress Report land, and that could be everybody because in addition to Manchester, Hooksett, and Auburn, where this show is part of the cable system, you can get it anywhere on your computer just by going to MPTS and checking on Channel 23. And I hope you all know that thanks to my good friend Mike Farley and usual co-host and his daughter Megan, we are now up on YouTube. All our shows can now be viewed on YouTube and Instagram, which I don't personally know much about, but I can certainly figure out YouTube. And this show, of course, in addition to that, has at least 5 re-airings after every program during the week, right on this same Channel 23, including one at 7 p.m. I thought I just mentioned that. And I should also mention that it's our usual pleasure to welcome on the first Wednesday of any month, which this is, the first Wednesday in October, my dear friend, Senator Lou D'Alessandro, one of the great public servants we've had in New Hampshire and served for so long and so well and done so much good for many people. But he is still in a recovery mode from some procedures he's had, and I'm want to reach out and wish him well, and I know he would be here, and he'd like to be here. And we'll look forward to be back here in November when we'll be right at the time of the election. Let's see, will the November show be the last show before the election or the first show after? I don't know. But in any event, Lou, we wish you well, and I miss you, but I have a terrific co-host to be with me here today, and that's our city chair, Alan Raff, who is a tireless and imaginative warrior on behalf of good things. And it's really a pleasure to have him here with us. We're very fortunate somebody of his caliber has taken on the chairing of the Manchester City Committee because this is a very important election. They're all important. We all say that every time. But I can't think of a more important election than this one, where the entire, the New Hampshire House is up for grabs. Is it going to be controlled by the Democrats or the Republicans? The Congress is up for grabs. We have an entirely Democratic federal delegation, 2 senators, 2 congressmen. One of the senators is up for re-election. Everybody knows that. If you haven't been seeing ads, you must not have a TV. Maggie Hassan and our 2 Congress people have to be up every 2 years, so they're up this time. And Manchester is important to everybody's results here, including our fine candidate for governor, Tom Sherman, who's been with us, and I hope will be again before the election. But this seems like a timely moment to take a step back and look at just what's at stake and the races that we got before us. And I hope a lot of people are going to. So many of these elections, the most important thing is the turnout. And I'm just hoping that there is a lot of interest in this election, as I think the bigger the turnout, the better it's going to be for our candidates. As a New Hampshire Democrat of long standing, I think that's going to be so important. So we hope that the energy and the incitement is out there and that people still have confidence that our election system in New Hampshire is fair and transparent and delivers the results that the voters intended to deliver. So with all that, Alan, I'd like to turn it over to you. Tell us a little about yourself, what your life is like these days, and what you're up to.
Thank you for having me, Representative. So this is also my audition for The Daily Show. I heard Trevor Noah's retiring, so putting my name in officially
You'd
here.
be good at it.
So right now things are great. We're busy. The Manchester Democrats are busy. We're working on getting an absentee request mailer out the door, and 2 people who have requested an absentee ballot or who may in the past or has requested one and hasn't gotten it. We're going to make sure that they get them in. As you said, turnout is what it's all about. And this election, like any other one, we get to the last month and everybody starts to bite their fingernails and get nervous about things. And the most important thing that the Manchester Democrats are doing, the New Hampshire Democratic Party is doing, and the coordinated campaign is doing, is putting it on full throttle right now. They're not doing anything except working every day, 12 hours, maybe more than 12 hours in a lot of cases, 12 hours a day, getting volunteers signed up to knock doors, making sure that mail is going out, making sure that people have signs, and that the exposure for our candidates is as much as it possibly can be. With this many weeks left, people are raising money. The Democrats are doing great at raising money, as you've seen. I can at least speak on the executive council side that the money cash on hand that the 5 executive council candidates have is almost 2 to 1 what the Republican candidates have.
That's very encouraging. I mean, you hate to say that that's so important, but it is important.
It is important. These
Somebody
districts are
said
huge.
money is the mother's milk of politics, and our mothers have showed up, I guess. So that's good.
Yeah, it is good. We have an amazing staff. Hundreds of staffers working across the state, working towards what we've been working towards since last fall when the municipal elections were over. And here in Manchester, the office over at 264 Mammoth Road, if you haven't been over there and want to check it out, is cranking. I was there this afternoon. They were getting literature ready for canvases and knocking doors this weekend. Every weekend and every day for the rest of the month, if you are free for an hour, for 45 minutes, for a half hour, go over to the office. It's a place to be right now.
And there's always something there you can do. If you don't feel like knocking doors, you can help support the people who are. You can answer phones. You can help prepare the literature, the lit drop packages for people. There's always something you can do to help out. And if you believe, like I believe, that this election is uniquely important, because I think the very future of democracy in this country itself is at risk in this election, that should be very motivational for people that believe democracy is the way we should govern ourselves in this country as we have for 247 years, whatever it is. But it's never been more direly challenged than it is today.
I get that it's difficult for people to hear that over and over again, right? Because we keep saying that the democracy is on the line. The way that we do things in America, generally speaking, is on the line. It's possible that we roll back into some kind of authoritarian state if we don't do something about it. But the truth is that we saw from 2016 until now that there are state governments that have been taken over by conservative governors and legislatures who have started to roll back roll back accessibility to voting for many Americans. And even here in New Hampshire, a state that is known for its ease of voting for people, has made it more difficult.
And for having fair and proper elections.
Yes.
Where the voters' will determines. The majority does control who wins the elections.
Yep. And even here, we've seen efforts that have been successful in some part to make it more difficult for people to vote.
And that's for sure, and it's even infected us here in New Hampshire. Napoleon's have said to have fired one of his great field marshals because he said he was unlucky.
He did.
And I must say, I think that Democrats have been extremely unlucky in that they've had tough years in the bicentennial years. 2010 was a bad year for the Democrats. 2020 was a pretty bad year for us here in New Hampshire. And that's the year when we have the census, and then follows the census as inevitably as the redistricting control by the results of the latest census, which we have in this country ever since 1790, when it's provided in the Constitution. Every 10 years we have a census. And we did in 2010, and we did in 2020. And in both those years we happened to have a legislative majority controlled by the other party. And we could have fixed that. We should have fixed that, because the Democrats, led by my good friend Representative Marjorie Smith from Durham, she had a bill that passed both houses to set up an independent redistricting commission. So that regardless of which party was doing better in the bicentennial years, the years that ended 1-0, regardless of that, there would have been an independent review of setting the electoral districts. The governor Sununu vetoed that bill, which I think was perhaps one of the worst vetoes he ever issued. And
which is saying a lot.
Which is saying a lot, because he had issued an awful lot of them that did a lot of damage in a lot of areas. And that veto could not be overcome. It's very hard to overcome in a gubernatorial veto. The requirement is, a 60% vote. Well, we have a call already. We're always welcome to calls in our show. Hey, caller, it's nice to have you with us. You're on the Progress Report with me and Alan. If you've got a question or comment, we'd love to. Hi
The
there.
only way the Democrats are going to win this election is if we get the word out and get the voters out there. And there are a lot of them that are undecided, and the only way we're going to win is if we get some of those or all of those undecided voters to band together with the Democrats. And like I said, the voters are the ones that decide who's going to win and who loses.
Yep.
Those are my comments.
Well, thank you very much. Those are very good comments, very well taken, and we appreciate your call. And Alan, I don't think you'll find anything to disagree with.
No, absolutely. I think the thing about making sure that people turn out is that you have to keep reminding them, despite the fact that we're obviously in tune with what's going on, and the community of people we spend time with knows exactly when all the dates are for the elections and the deadlines are for X, Y, and Z things. That people have to be reminded, and they have to be consistently reminded. And about the undeclared voters thing, that's always the case in New Hampshire. We have more undeclared voters than Republicans or Democrats, and if we want to win, we have to convince them that we're the way to go.
And you have to remember that in New Hampshire, as in the nation at large, the Democrats only get a majority if they get more than 50% of the vote. A mere 50.1 won't do it because of the redistricting, the gerrymandering, which has gone on. And we certainly had that in this last effort, too. We had a very fine candidate in Kevin Kavanaugh, who ably represented Senate District 16, which included 3 wards in Manchester, Hooksett, Dunbarton. That was gerrymandered in a way that he felt that it was putting impossible burdens in his place. And he's not given up by any means. He's become the candidate for the Executive Council District representing some of that territory. And he's going to be a very strong candidate, and I wish him well. But the fact that he felt that he could not continue to run for another term as state senator shows the power that this redistricting, very biased, very partisan, can have on people.
Also anti-Manchester in this
and
case.
Anti-Manchester, very good point. And so, we have to do better than just getting half the votes. We have to get like 54 or 55% to claim the majority in either of the houses. It ain't right. It should be 50% plus 1 wins, but that's not the way the system works with the redistricting that we've had to go through as a result of the 2020 census. So let's look at the situation we're facing, Alan, and maybe you'd like to go down and talk about some of these races and talk about the efforts that are being made, of which you're certainly a fine leader of the effort here in Manchester.
Well, absolutely. As is the case always, the federal candidates are running fantastic campaigns. They have their own teams, and some of these folks on the Custer campaign, the Pappas campaign, the Hassan campaign have been working for their member of Congress for years and years, know the state well, know the volunteer network well, know the activists well, and are doing exactly what they need to be doing. I think that they have a huge advantage over the Republican counterparts on the other side running against them, because these people have to build infrastructure. The Republicans do a lot of things very well and some things better than we do, but as far as creating campaign infrastructure that's long-lasting, staff members that are competent and stay around and continue to work within their party system is not really their forte, and organizing them all to work together on one ticket is also something they just have a difficult time with, whereas we, as a Democratic Party in New Hampshire, have the coordinated campaign where the bottom of the ballot is working with the top of the ticket at all times and working for the same things and talking to the same people, sharing information, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a testament to the strength of these candidates and their abilities that they are apparently leading in the polls. Don't pay any attention to that. Work as hard as you can. Forget the polls. But I did mention it. And I think it's really extraordinary because, nationally, this is a tough time for Democrats. We have some real headwinds, and the inflation rate is higher than we want it to be. And President Biden's poll numbers are lower than we would like, although they're coming up a bit.
Again, you just said not to pay attention to the polls. They're not. So the polls, I think it's important to, my wife is a data analyst, and she always says to me, make sure that you're looking at what the poll is based off of. Look at the sample set. Look at when you're seeing these things that either scare you or excite you as far as the numbers go on any given poll. Make sure you know what that actual poll is based off of, because you want to be sure you're getting excited or sad about the right thing. Also, at the same time, they're just polls, and we've seen situations in the past where polls have been totally wrong, especially here in New Hampshire, and that's why, like you said, it's so important. Keep working.
Keep working. Always run and be a supporter, assuming your candidate is one vote behind or maybe a couple hundred votes behind, and you just got to make it up in these closing weeks of this campaign. That's the way you should always go forward on it. I mentioned Kevin Kavanaugh and his campaign against Ted Gatzis to give us a second seat. We hope more than just two in the New Hampshire Executive Council in this time. But I have to say, one of the most amazing things that's come about is the candidate who emerged to represent the redone Senate District 16. That's June Trisciani. I mean, what an unbelievable story that is. A woman who had never run for public office before last year. She threw her hat in the ring to be one of the two aldermen at large representing this great city. And by God, she ended up topping the ticket for that race. So she is making quite a difference. And we had no candidate as of the before the New Hampshire primary vote last month. And then she said she would be willing to become a write-in candidate, and she did. And she ended up with, you needed 35 write-in votes to become the candidate. She beat that by 600 votes or something. I mean, so, and this is an extraordinary thing.
She also, I heard the joke, I won't say that I can't take credit for it. I think it was Senator Susie who said it, but she's now the candidate that's been in the race the longest, despite not having been on the ballot.
That's right.
Has now been
the Republican candidate who was supposedly going to be in the race is withdrawn because of health reasons. We're sorry about that, sir, but that is the fact. And so the Republicans, and I just found this, I'm always amazed by some of the things they do. Did they reach down to the woman who lived in the district, who had competed for the primary vote, but came up short against the guy who withdrew? No, they turned out somebody who had not been in the race at all. They picked Keith Murphy, owns Murphy's Tap Room, and anointed him to be the race. That's a very stunning event, and
especially for somebody who was on the election law committee, setting up districts in the House.
Yeah. So that's right. In any event, I think that's one of the races to really watch. It's a tough district, as it's been gerrymandered. There's no other word for it. But if anybody can pull it off, I believe that June will do that.
She does not like to lose, as she's told me many times, and she's working like that is the case.
She has no experience of losing, and she doesn't want to start this year.
Yep, I'm all for that.
Yeah. So let's look at some of the other races here in Manchester. We have other senators who are hoping to represent parts of this great Queen City. And you want to talk a little bit about their races and what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Senator Susi and Senator D'Alessandro are both, Senator D right now, as you mentioned, is recovering from some health stuff, but he is very well known. He's running against Rich Gerard. I think that the people of Manchester know that Senator D'Alessandro has been there for them for decades and is one of the strongest voices in the Senate, most helpful people to get Republicans to come along with us on some things that we can actually agree on. He's extremely valuable. He's always delivered for the Queen City and cares so much about this city.
Yeah, he's a lifelong, well, not lifelong, but
almost
all his life as a part of Manchester. And he's been a part of our political scene, and he has done so much good for so many people. I once had the privilege of driving back from Concord when I was up at the State House, and he was with him. And, well, I'm a little hungry. Let's stop. Where do you want to stop? You want to stop at the McDonald's? You want to stop? No, let's stop at the McDonald's. By God, he walked in and so many people knew him and wanted to thank him for doing something for him. It was just stunning. It was the way politics should work. And that's what he displayed. And I mean, he's done that all over the district that he served for so long, whether it was Goffstown, Manchester, or, the other parts of that district that he represented. So
yeah, and Senator Susie, obviously leader in the Senate, she's been a great leader for us through some really hard times, took us all the way through COVID and the majority, and she brings the Senate caucus, the Democrats, together and has been a strong advocate for our platform, the Senate's platform, Democratic Party platform. Her opponent, she has run against before and beat him, and I have no doubt that she's going to do that again. She's got a great campaign manager that came on recently helping her out. And if you need a Susie sign and you're in Senator Susie's district, come over to the office at 264 Mammoth Road. We got some for you.
And for the other candidates,
we do too. These were fresh Susie signs, so I wanted to make sure I put it out there for it, Senator.
Okay. Well, Alan, we often take a break about this time. I suggest maybe we'll do that now, and then maybe I'll ask Brendan if he'd like to put up one of the videos that Mike sent over for you when we come back. If you would do that for us, if that's okay. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. This is the progress report for the first Wednesday in October, and it's beginning to feel like fall. I was driving back from Goffstown this morning after my morning walk into the village, and by God, the foliage was really pretty. It was very pretty. It's not peak, but there was plenty of beautiful color, and with the kind of the mist and the little bit of rain, it just looked vibrant, I think. We're so fortunate to live in this state with all the glories we have in our various seasons, and our many free and fair elections is a glory of this state too. Mike is not with us today, as he is the first Wednesday of the month. Every month he's off doing many good things, all as his position as the head of the Hibernian Society, the Ancient and Honorable Order of Hibernians, a fine charitable organization that he's proud to serve. But he typically leaves us with a couple of videos, and one of them I'm gonna have Brendan play for us now. Then one involving Tucker Carlson. Then we'll be back to our discussion.
Admission. That's the clearest admission we're ever going to get. No one could miss it, least of all the Russians. The Biden administration is responsible, either directly or through proxies, for the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines and the environmental catastrophe and the economic collapse that will certainly follow. That is true. It's done. So the question is, where does that leave us? And that's the problem. This act leaves us, the United States, with no option but total war with Russia. There is no off-ramp now. There is no way out. We are all in, no matter what that means, no matter where it goes.
Ведущий Fox хакер Карлсон предупреждает, что если ЧП найдут американский след, русские смогут ответить. И вообще все это похоже на казус Бейли.
Well, that's a little off the topic we're talking about today about the elections, but not entirely, because who could have imagined that one of the most influential people in the entire Republican Party, Tucker Carlson, with his vast audience on Fox News, is promoting the Russian line, as he's done so often. We used to have a time in this country when we had our political differences, but the saying was, political differences end at the water's edge. It doesn't seem like that's true anymore. We've had Tucker Carlson in a long time kind of being an apologist for the Putin government in Russia and its behavior, even to kind of suggesting. I just find that appalling. Here we have a nation whose sovereign territory has been unreasonably and brutally invaded by Russia, and they're fighting valiantly with much help from our president and our government, led by our president. It's been vital and important to them, and achieving great success. And we have stuff like that this is going to make a nuclear war with Russia inevitable, these policies. I think that's pretty despicable, folks, but I digress. We want to get back to New Hampshire and our efforts to right the ship of state here.
I do think, though, to this extent about misinformation and not having scruples about what's true when they're talking to their audience, whether that's constituents or TV viewers, is that you see some of that already coming over, especially in the federal races, but also at the state level, some of the candidates mudslinging is just the facts do not support what these claims are being said about Senator Hassan, about Congressman Pappas, about Congresswoman Custer. It's just not true. Check your facts. Not saying do your own research in the colloquial way. I mean, actually make sure that what is being said is based in reality, unlike something like the Americans sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline, which, you know, while we're trying to get our gas prices to come down and heating oil to subside a little bit, we would sabotage Europe's supply of natural gas. It makes no sense.
It does not make any sense. That's absolutely true. You know, I forget who said it, but there's a famous quote that we used to hear about a lot in law school. Facts are stubborn things. Well, not to the Republicans. Facts are not stubborn at all. They can be maneuvered into whatever you want them to be.
Alternative facts.
Yeah, well, Kellyanne Conway famously said that Trump had his own alternative facts. I didn't know there was such a thing as an alternative facts. I thought there was truth and there was not error. There was not
I would have done better in
two
law
versions
school.
of truth.
If there were alternative facts we could have based things on in law school, I would have done a lot better.
Did you go to law school?
I did, yeah. I'm
Did
an
you
attorney.
graduate from law school?
Yeah. I'm barred here in Mass and D.C.
Have you ever practiced law?
Just administrative law with the the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission here, working for the IBW.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
doing
I did
site
not know you were a
evaluation.
lawyer.
I am, yeah.
Well, I'm guilty of that too, although
Yeah,
I'm a
well,
retired lawyer.
Here we are.
Here we are. Okay. Well, the law can lead you to many different things
Public
that
television.
do very well. I learned when I was running and trying to raise money for my Senate campaign against Ted Gatzis, now facing Kevin Kavanaugh. I learned, you know, when I was talking to my friends from law school, most of them had done extremely well, but the ones that did really well weren't lawyers. They were hedge fund managers.
Yep, same with me.
or investment bankers.
Yep, they worked at KPMG
They were
or something
they
like
were
that.
the
Yep.
ones that really were raking it in, not the lawyers so much.
I always feel great when one of them calls me and says, "Oh, you're doing such great things," and I'm like, "And you're making $250,000." So
Yeah. So one of the things we've had to deal with here in New Hampshire for a good many years, and I know you're really up on this, Alan, is the issue of the Free Staters. I don't know how many years ago when they decided they would pick a state to be their target. Boy, did they mean that in a
couple decades
invidious
ago.
sense. And then they had tried to get a total of 20,000 people pledged to move to New Hampshire. Many of them did, and many of them been involved in elections in our state, and they tend to not care whether they sign up as a Democrat or Republican, whichever seems most likely to result in their electoral success, so they can go to Concord and taking a wrecking ball to our government.
not only take a wrecking ball, but part of the contract that they signed before they moved here said that their goal was to secede from the United States of America.
And they actually put a vote before them, and 15 members of the House voted for it. I mean,
Yeah,
what
it's-
was the Civil War about?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so the trouble is that, you know, especially at the local level, it's hard to know who the candidates are. And even for people on the city committees like myself, if we don't meet the person and they aren't answering our calls for contact or trying to meet with us, there's no way to know whether they're a Democrat, Republican, Free Stater, in disguise running for something. But in this case, we've gotten a lot of calls here in Manchester, at least to myself, emails, et cetera, to folks asking about the ballot that's going to be on the general election and how there are several candidates who are on both sides of the ballot. I can tell you right now that the offices that we're concerned about the Free Staters being in, some of you may have gotten a text message if you're a Democrat on the primary election day saying that you should write in Richard Manzo and Nicholas Sarwark. They are Free Staters. They are not Democrats, not associated with anything that the Manchester Democratic City Committee does or the New Hampshire Democratic Party. So on your ballot, under county treasurer and county attorney, do not vote for Richard Manzo. Do not vote for Nicholas Sarwark. And if anybody out there in TV land is interested or knows anybody that would be interested in putting themselves forward and volunteering to be a write-in candidate for county attorney, we need county treasurer, we need sheriff, and we need county commissioner. And we can't start a write-in campaign unless we have somebody that is willing to do the work and ready to do the work, prepared to do the work if they get elected. But we are looking for them because we do not want Richard Manzo or Nicholas Sarwark to be elected by Democratic
Well, I'm
voters.
certainly glad you brought that up because that's even news to me. And it's not too late to start to launch a write-in campaign, even though we're just more than a month away from the November 8th election. So that's very important. But I have to say that although we have these two races that Alan mentioned, where the write-in candidate, the candidates that are going to be on the ballot are free staters. Thanks to Alan's work, and I also have to credit Steve Marchand, who, by the way, will be our guest next week. Steve Marchand is going to be with us next week, and I very much look forward to welcoming him. They have done a great job of educating people as to who are not the Democrats, but in fact the Free Staters, and everyone that was attempting to get on the ballot in the primary failed to that, even in races where there were multiple choices that you could vote for and have them count toward a like 4 out of 5. The one that would come in fifth would be the Free Stater, and I think that's just, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and we put the sunlight on them thanks to Alan and Steve Marchand and others.
Granite State Organizing Project.
Granite State
Organizing
Progress,
Project. They're great. They
just did a terrific job on all of that. So that's really good. So let's see. We've talked a little bit about polling here. We've talked about that. I wanted to ask you about something that just so much concerns me, and that is the unceasing effort by the other party, pretty much all the other party, to make it harder to vote, to increase the burden on our poll workers, to increase the whole problem of making voting as easy and accessible as possible, which it should be, because the disgrace in this country, not so much in New Hampshire, although we could do much better, but the disgrace in country isn't the people who vote who shouldn't vote. That's a tiny number of people. There's no real fraud at all to mount anything, but the fact that we don't have more people vote. And, I'd like you to speak about that.
So I remember my dad talking to me about this during the Bush administration, and I, as a young man, was wondering why in America, the greatest democracy in the world, that one of the two political parties would want to be making it any more difficult when voter ID was really becoming more of a hot issue, and the Voting Rights Act was becoming more and more seeming like it was going to be chipped away at. And he said to me, because the other side knows that if everybody that can vote does vote, that they'll never win an election again.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to say that I have Republican friends. There are good Republicans who believe in democracy. But the truth is that the policies that have been put forth across the country and here in New Hampshire, that we've seen the opposite of them wanting to expand democracy and the franchise of our citizens. And it's unfortunate, because you'd think the one thing that we could agree on, like you said, that partisanship ends at the water's edge, would be, the fundamental cornerstone of our country, which is our democracy and the franchise to vote and select your representatives fairly in free and fair elections. And it is a problem that we've seen here in New Hampshire. And I think there's, in a lot of states, we talked about this before the show, a lot of states, the Secretary of State, who is the person in most cases in other states and in ours, that's responsible for administering elections, as well as a bunch of other things, record keeping and, all of that kind of stuff, the business side of the state as well, that person, the Secretary of State in their office, is in charge of it, and they're elected in a lot of states by the people popularly elected. But here in New Hampshire, it's elected by a much smaller body, the New Hampshire legislature. Despite being the largest state legislature in the country, it's still a smaller body of people electing a Secretary of State who, of course, will do what the legislature directs them to do as far as the statutes and the laws that are signed by the governor and become statute. But as far as, the office policy and the way that they train the poll workers, the way that their office conducts themselves, the ease that their website is accessible, these are all things that the Secretary of State's office is responsible for, and we don't get to popularly elect them, but we do get to popularly elect our legislators, who then select the Secretary of State. So when you're thinking about how can I make sure that our elections are fair and free, well, we could get a new Secretary of State, but to do that, we would need to win the legislature, or at least enough seats in the legislature where we could have a candidate who isn't our current Secretary of State, David Scanlon, or we could have a new Secretary of State if we do well in the elections.
Yeah. And would you think that that is something that Democrats should support, a different Secretary of State?
So my feeling on this has always been that in New Hampshire, we like him or dislike Secretary Gardner. He was an institution that, because of the time that he spent in the office and the relationships that he's built, For most of his career in that office, he was thought of as apolitical, and that it wasn't a political office. At the end there, we had the voter integrity commission and all the Trump stuff that he seemed to go to the other side of the aisle from what we were trying to advocate and what we were trying to push for, modernizing our electoral system here in New Hampshire. But what we did have is we had two parties that agreed that that office was above political parties. And I think with, I respect and love Colin Van Ostern, but I think that first race in 2016 for Secretary of State against Gardner really politicized it. And I guess it was probably a matter of time before it became a political party thing. All that had to happen was for Secretary Gardner to not be there and to have a new person come into that position. And so now I guess the argument to keep Secretary Sandlin would be that, well, he was with Secretary Gardner for so long, and we don't want to make it political. It shouldn't be a political thing. However, as we've seen, and as I have seen firsthand, he's a really nice guy, but his policy and the way that he thinks about elections is not the way that you and I think about elections. And the way that he can interpret what he's being told to do and the things that he can do to help make it easier for people to vote that aren't dictated by statute, he's not doing them to what I and to what the party platform of the New Hampshire Democratic Party would like to see. Modernizing our online voter registration, making sure that people can still be able to register to vote on the same day, and if they don't have an ID, no voter ID. There's ways that we can secure and modernize our electoral system without making it a partisan process. And I think that if we're going to get another Secretary of State that isn't Scanlon, that person, who would be a Democrat, would have to come into that office and say, I don't want to make this about politics. I want to make this about fairness. I don't want this to be not going to do things because I think like a Democrat or I think like a Republican. I'm going to do things based on how to make it the best system that we can have and the fairest system that we can have and most accessible system that we can have for Granite Staters.
I was a long-time supporter of Bill Gardner, who was a Manchester guy and was nominally a Democrat, and I think he ably served the state for a long time. And then, when the big contest came up, was it 2016, you said, and he was severely tested, survived by one vote in the House, I believe, and originally a tie, and then there was a tiebreaker vote. The thing that really kind of did it for me was when he agreed to serve on Trump's election commission along with Chris Kobach, the notorious Secretary of State for Kansas, who was a notorious advocate of voter suppression on the grounds that there was widespread fraud, which is absolutely not true. That really did it for me, and so I did not vote my last chance to vote for Secretary of State for him, but he did barely survive that, and I can give him credit for what he did for many long years of service to the state, but still be unhappy about the way that his term ended, which I think was not good. So in any event, I'm very interested to hear you say that, and it's absolutely true. There's so many things are going to turn on who prevails in this election in controlling our New Hampshire General Court, the Senate, and the State House. There's so many things on that. One thing brings to mind, I just have to mention, I think there was an argument in the Supreme Court on this yesterday. There's a voting rights case before the United States Supreme Court, which may result in the court ruling that state legislatures can alone, without any court review, state or federal, decide who wins the elections in their state. So that would mean, if that had been the rule in 2020, the Republican legislatures that controlled, I guess, Wisconsin, I don't know, it was Pennsylvania, but the states that were so critical,
Georgia,
they could have done what Trump wanted them to do and throw out the electors that were preferred by the majority of the voters in those states. No doubt about it. They had a strong majority in those states voting the Democrats and the electors that would be representing that vote. Throw that out and just change the result of the election. That would mean that if Trump runs again in 2024, certainly seems like that's not at all unlikely. If that happens and this is in place and the Republicans control state houses in these big swing states, Maryland, Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, those states, they can declare the election victory in spite of the fact that a majority of their voters did not vote that way. Think about that, about the threat to democracy that I see everywhere around us, and there's one vehicle to it. And the other one, which I believe I mentioned before and has been the subject of things, same thing with the House of Representatives. To me, it's appalling that in the November 6th, after the notorious insurrection was pushed back with pretty severe consequences for everybody involved, including the poor Capitol Police Force that suffered such grievous injuries defending our Capitol. The representatives and senators that were put at risk of their lives, including the Vice President of the United States, hang Mike Pence, all that. In spite of all that, when they came to certifying the vote, which should be a purely ceremonial act, purely ceremonial, 1/3 of the Republicans voted not to certify the result. If the Republicans take over the House in 2024, who knows what that majority might be? It might be a majority that will refuse to certify the results. So there's two ways that we can lose the 2024 election, even if we win the votes that should prevail and make the, I would hope, Democratic candidate for president be the president. There are two ways. It can happen in the state legislatures. It can happen in the U.S. Congress. These are really frightening things. And it got me really worried about it, and a lot of the good people are worried too.
I think that goes kind of along with what we were talking about with the census and winning elections in every decade.
Every decade.
And that is that Democrats need to be better at making the unsexy issues of the census, the Supreme Court, issues that rally our voters, and explaining to them why it's so important. Because if we don't have the majority in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. Congress, and we do have the presidency, and we have another Supreme Court nomination that's up, we could be in trouble again, and that would be a problem.
Yeah,
we could be sitting in a situation like we did with Merrick Garland and President Obama, and we don't want that to happen. So go out and vote, folks. Because
unfortunately, it's become a cliche. This is the most important election because we hear it all the time. But this time, it's more true than ever. It's absolutely more true than ever. Because
so we're going to keep saying it.
We're going to keep saying it. And democracy with a small d is really on the ballot. And a lot of people are very, very concerned about it. And, we are seeing a wave of authoritarianism around the globe, which I don't understand, whether it's in Brazil or now Italy and Hungary and Poland and the Philippines and never mind China and Russia, which have been, run by autocrats for a long time. It's happening in countries that we thought were reliable democracies, and it's, I think a whole lot of it comes from following our lead from the guy that came down the escalator in 2015 with the orange hair, who plainly made no effort to govern on behalf of all the people, but only on behalf of the people that were his true believers and supporters. But I guess we should go on and talk about something.
No, I totally agree with you. I think that we've always been a shining light of an example, and we forget sometimes that because we've been lucky, as far as the people who've been at the helm of this country, that can be a bad example as well.
Yeah.
And when people who aspire to be like Americans and countries, Brazil's a good example, they see that this is tolerated and this kind of thing flies in the best and most powerful democracy in the world, it leaves space for people like Bolsonaro to do what he's been doing in that country for years now, and based on no evidence, making claims just like President Trump. He even uses some of the same rhetoric. A lot of these countries, these dictators or dictators in the making, use the same terminology that the president uses, or the former president uses.
So there's something you mentioned that I would like to have you follow up on. One of the things Secretary Scanlon has done is set up this Voter Confidence Commission.
Yeah.
And two good co-chairmen of this, Brad Cook from Manchester and Dick Sweat from Bow. Fine people. There's some good people on this commission. But what are your thoughts about it? Do we need it? Is it doing the right thing? And is it really hard to figure out why the voters lack confidence in our elections?
I think that this is the same kind of, how I feel about it is that it's the same kind of situation we had at the federal level. People like Ted Cruz continuously saying that the American people don't have faith in their electoral system, they don't have faith in the polls and the way that we do things, but it is because of the things that the Republican Party had been saying that these voters do not have confidence. So really saying that, voters don't have confidence, and it's like, well, then stop feeding misrepresentations and stop saying things like, there's rampant voter fraud when there's almost no examples of it across the country.
Essentially none.
Essentially none.
There's never zero because it's a
Yeah, of
system
course.
that involves
Yeah.
millions of votes, but there's very few, none that have changed the results of any election or could.
Yeah, exactly. So I, as far as that, the commission goes, I don't think it was necessary. I think this is actually a pretty good example of something where Secretary Scanlon is willing to play ball with the conservative anti-fact wing of the conservative side of politics, where he's willing to say, well, you know what, we need to establish this because people don't have faith in it. And the truth is that people have faith in it. The fact that Senator Gray doesn't have faith in it, or that there is parts of the loud Republican elected officials don't have faith in it.
I don't know, Alan. I'm afraid that because of the misrepresentation and misinformation that comes over our airwaves, particularly from the Fox network, I think a lot of people truly do not have confidence. So maybe a commission can find a way to have those people have confidence. But on the other hand, I understand your point. Having a voter confidence commission sort of implies that maybe people have a reason not to have confidence. So, you got to weigh out those two things. Have you been before the commission in your capacity as city chair?
No, I haven't.
I don't even know whether they're done with their hearings and when we can expect a report.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I mean, I'd be really interested in that. I had them scheduled for appearance here and maybe try to do that again, because we're going to be doing mostly talking about our elections and our candidates, leading up to the election, and then the agenda of the progress report will expand again in other areas which I would like to pay attention to, like goings on in Manchester and our cultural and artistic life and community development, all those things. But right now, I think this election is pretty much front and center, and we want to work on it as much as we can.
And let's just say that the cultural, artistic, and all of that kind of vibrance that Manchester does have can be impacted by elections too. Tie it right
Absolutely.
back to that. The fact that money that flows to the city or money that doesn't flow to the city can be directly decided because of legislation put in place or legislators that want to stick it to Manchester or want to help Manchester. And there's grants that become available that the city can take that might not be able to take because of statutes that get passed. We've seen that in the past, rail is a good example of something where we've wanted to fund the study on rail for a few $1 million to see the feasibility of doing it and accept federal funds for that, and the legislature said, "No, you can't do that. You can't accept federal funds for this, even just to study it." So. And that'd be great for Manchester, and the vibrance and the culture of our city.
That'll get on one of my other hobby horses. Our terrible lagging behind the rest of New England in addressing our energy issues, principally including the cost of energy. The cost of energy. One of my colleagues on the Science, Technology, Energy Committee, who's still serving, Rebecca McWilliams, wrote a wonderful opinion and piece in the Union Leader a few days ago, pointing out the bills that the Democrats had passed or put forward that the Republicans killed, which really would have addressed the cost of energy.
The governor specifically has vetoed so many bills.
So many bills.
That
so
would
many
have been
bills.
great. That actually had bipartisan support in a lot of cases. Net metering.
Net metering is a prime example. Funding energy efficiency, That's the way to lower our costs. We can't do much about the rates for electricity. Those are set by the PUC according to a legal formula that they get their cost plus an authorized rate of return. The legislature can't do anything about it, and it's just baloney to pretend that they can.
I will add, though, that the PUC commissioners are appointed by the governor and approved by the executive council. So if you're unhappy about the way that the utilities are functioning in New Hampshire, it's another reason to go vote.
Well, they did something today that was pretty distressing about launching an investigation into the energy efficiency programs, which they should not be doing. I mean, they should be approving or supporting stakeholder meetings to develop a comprehensive energy funding mechanism, and then deciding whether to approve it or not investigating whether energy efficiency is efficient and works. But
They want to have a commission
Yeah.
to see if they need a commission to
yeah,
study
right.
this. Yeah, sounds about right.
So anyway, there's so much that depends on the outcome of this election. Nationally, of course, it's huge, and in the state, it's always huge. And right now, we have just a little time left. So let's talk about the things you're going to be doing to motivate people, and how motivated you think people are as we get into the last month. And I know it's going to end up with a countdown to victory.
Yeah, so every weekend, every day, like I said, the Manchester City Democrats and the New Hampshire Democratic Party's coordinated campaign called Organize New Hampshire. Go to nhdp.org if you want information on the coordinated campaign and ways to figure out how you can volunteer or help out. But we're going to be going out every day, knocking doors, making phone calls. This weekend we have a big canvass in the morning. We have our City Dems meeting at 8:30 in the morning at the office at 264 Mammoth Road. If you want to come to the meeting and stay after to go knock some doors, we would love that. So that is the plan for Saturday and for Sunday. And as the weeks go by, we have a couple of more weeks until the campaign goes into the get out the vote GOTV mode, where you're going to start seeing hundreds of volunteers coming from all over the state to go to the areas that need the canvassing the most to get these doors knocked and these universes completed, to make sure we've talked to the most amount of voters that we possibly can. Some cases, speaking to them twice if we've tried to persuade them that they should vote for one of our candidates. But there's going to be a lot of mail coming out. Lots of money being spent on mail, good pieces. I've seen some good pieces from independent groups that have been, trying to motivate people to vote, either based on excitement or fear in some cases, unfortunately. But there are things to be afraid of, and that is a legitimate reason to go vote. I think that the biggest thing that I'm happy about is that the candidates, we were at that the Meet the Candidate event, which was over on Myrtle Street on Sunday, and we had about 20 of our House candidates, and we had Senator Soucy and Senator Kavanaugh and Congressman Pappas there, and the candidates all seemed to be cohesively working together, all feeling like they were part of a team, enthusiastic, newcomers to people who've run, 10, and this will be like their 10th term serving, all coming together and pulling for the same thing. And I feel like we right now have the momentum, we have the enthusiasm, but we need more people to come out and volunteer. The truth is, like we said at the beginning of the show, to win, it's not 50 plus one, it's 50 plus more. And so in these districts, we need more help than we've had in the past. And that is incumbent on all of us who are watching the show and who care about the outcome, but are wondering when the right time is to volunteer. The time is now, and tomorrow, and the day after, and every day that you can,
right
until
up to November 8th.
Yes, yeah. And tomorrow there is an event happening at the Breezeway Pub at 6:30 to 8:30, I believe, and it is going to be for the LGBTQ plus community, bringing folks in to come and volunteer and get to know our staffers and our candidates. Congressman Pappas is going to be there. If you're interested in that, go check out the Organize NH website. You can check them out on Facebook.
Boy, if there's any of our citizens who'd be passionate about this election, it's those folks, I would say.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, they are definitely on the line.
Yeah.
Their rights could be reversed just as easily as women's rights were reversed with the Dobbs decision reversing Roe v. versus Wade.
And I think so that really is something that I think all Democrats or people who are undeclared voters who believe in civil rights and protecting that community and protecting all the communities that we talk about that could be, on the chopping block as far as their rights go, is that go around and talk to your friends and talk to voters who can be persuaded, and talk to them about we should be we're running on taking our rights back. Usually you hear Republicans always running on, we need to take our rights back. I need our Second Amendment right, our right to religious freedom, and to have the state pay for our private schools through EFAs. But we should be running on taking our rights back, because this is what it's about. We just want the government to stay out of our private life, which used to be something that Republicans were also
You
pretty
used to
keen
think
on.
that, yes, you did.
And now I think that we should be pushing that message, and we should be talking to and are talking to undeclared voters, or people who used to be Republican or currently are, who don't feel comfortable with the way that things are going as far as women's rights, LGBTQ rights, minority rights being affected, and the way that this appears to be going if we continue to elect Republican majorities in the state.
Very good. Well, we're pretty much at the end here, Alan, and it's been a terrific discussion with you. And,
Plug for the Countdown to Victory Party.
Yes, please do that. We do have time for that.
Yeah, on November 4th at 6:30 p.m. at the Alpine Club, we are having our annual Countdown to Victory dinner. That's the Manchester City Democrats event prior to the election, where all of our candidates and our volunteers and the public is welcome to come and enjoy some dinner and some alcohol and some cheer and some wonderful candidates speaking, but really to come celebrate the work that everybody's put in up to this point and get ready to the victory that lies ahead the next week. So if you're interested, check out our Facebook page, the Manchester City Democrats. You can see it if you click on the events portion of that Facebook page, or you can go to manchesterdemocrats.org and check out the events there. And again, that's November 4th. Tickets are $35. You can still get them, but get them before they sell out.
There you go. Everybody should do that. It's going to be a good time, I know. And I really feel that in New Hampshire, we've got some pretty stiff headwinds against us nationally as Democrats this year. I hope everybody overcomes them across this great country, but it's going to be tough. But I think in New Hampshire, the enthusiasm, the leadership we've got in our party, from our chairman to Chairman Raff here in Manchester to other chairmen around, and the strength of our candidates. We've got candidates that are not embarrassing us. Think about the Republican candidate running for Senate in Georgia. Shouldn't you be embarrassed by that? But we don't have anything like that. We have a candidate for Senate running against Maggie Hassan, who's just done a 180 flip-flop, and whether the election was stolen, who knows what he'll flip-flop on again. We have candidates running against our candidates that celebrate the loss of a constitutional right with the reversal of Roe v. Wade. That's not our candidates. Our candidates are forthright and in favor of maintaining our constitutional rights and having the government work to deliver benefits to the people, which is the function of government. The other party tends to run against the government they hope to serve. Our candidates want to serve the government and help it serve the people and help them meet their needs. So there I've been pontificating again, sermonizing, but I truly do believe it. Alan, terrific of you to join me. I enjoyed it very much.
Me.
And it was great. So
Thank you.
Next week I'll be back with Mike Farley and Steve Marchand, and that should be very interesting. Take care, folks. Bye.